developing tasks that measure very pure thinking abilities. You know, neuropsychologists, we're very interested in diseases and brain injuries, and so we give tests that are very sensitive to these conditions. And so because they're sensitive, sometimes the tests are not so specific. You know, so we might give a test like, the trail making test, okay? So trail making, you have part A and part B. So part A is a simple test of visual scanning and processing speed. And what you ask the person to do, this is the sample, is to simply connect the numbers, starting with 1 in numerical order, right? As quickly as they can. And then they get the real test, which is 25 dots. And after that, they get trail making test part B, where you say, okay, similar idea here, but now you have numbers and letters. And so what I'd like you to do is to alternate between numbers and letters in order. So you're going to go from 1 to A, 2B, 3C, 4D, and so on. And this is the practice again. The test, you have 25. Or about. So the idea is that by giving part A, you get a relatively good sense of how they are just in terms of their motor speed and their visual scanning. And then by giving part B, you can now look at a higher order aspect of cognition, which is this mental flexibility, or the ability to kind of shift attention back and forth between competing stimuli. But the reason I'm describing this is because we use this as a test of executive functioning, and it's very sensitive to brain damage. But I can't say for sure that this measures one very specific process. It measures a lot of different things. And so neuropsychologists tend to use tests like this that are sensitive to brain injury that measure kind of a lot of different things. Whereas cognitive psychologists would really, their goal would be to kind of isolate a very specific cognitive phenomenon, like just mental set switching, for example, in the absence of any sensory or motor demands. Different tests probably would have been a better example, but what I've tried to do where I am now in the cognitive neuroscience division is use tools from cognitive psychologists to really isolate the specific errors that are happening on the meta-memory test. Again, so meta-memory measures a lot of things, but if the goal is to really, for me right now, to pinpoint the specific thing that's going wrong, to try to learn more about what's causing the syndrome and potentially the brain areas that might be affected in people who are unaware versus aware.
How do people who predict that they'll do well on the meta-memory tests, how do they react when they don't do well?
That's a good question. Differently. There's different subtypes, I think, of people who are unaware. So there are some people who say they don't have a memory problem, and then you test them, and they're confronted with poor performance, and they say, oh wow, maybe I do have a memory problem. There are other patients who still, when confronted, still don't appreciate that maybe that there's something about their memory that has changed. They'll oftentimes say, well, the lighting was bad, or I was uncomfortable, or I was hungry, or I heard someone talking outside, and sort of place the blame externally.
Just another one, actually. Do you use their emotions to gauge the intensity of their denial?
Right. That's another good question. Yeah, so they're different, right? So level of awareness and then the emotional component to awareness can be separated. So there are some people who say, yeah, I have Alzheimer's disease, as if they're saying I had a turkey sandwich for lunch. And there are other people who are very clearly emotional about this diagnosis. And so I think another step in this research would be to more clearly outline how emotion maps onto awareness. And I think it's an important question, and I see very different emotional reactions in different people, and I don't know if it means they're more aware, but it means that somehow their awareness has more of right, there's some patients are apathetic and some are not, maps on to where they are,
Right.
but it's another dimension to it.
What kind of gamma score will you get if you have someone who's on the opposite end of the spectrum who says, oh, I don't know if I'm going to get this right, and then gets it right?
Right, so if they're underconfident. Well, what's interesting is that gamma actually is not a measure of confidence. So there are two types of, so monitoring is the broad category of assessing your own performance, right? And there are different scores to assess monitoring. You can look at resolution, which is gamma is a measure of resolution, which is the degree to which the predictions and memory are associated, but not necessarily in any direction. And then calibration is a measure of confidence, under or overconfidence. And so you actually wouldn't use gamma to look at confidence. So you can get a very bad gamma score if you're over or underconfident, as long as. So I'll say it differently. If you're consistently overconfident, right? If you always think you're going to do better than you do, you could get a perfect gamma score. As long as your predictions and accuracy are always rising and falling together. So even if one's up here, even if your confidence is up here and your accuracy is down here, as long as they stay kind of at the same, they have the same relationship across the different items, you'd actually get a perfect gamma score. Same for if you're underconfident. Gamma looks at, does this happen item to item? Does the confidence and accuracy kind of flip-flop for different items? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, just in regards to like emotional response, my grandmother has Alzheimer's, and usually when she would keep asking the same question over and over again, and you would confront her with that, she would just get very frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a sense like she didn't know that she kept repeating the question,
Right.
but she just didn't want. She kind of just didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
Few minutes later she'd be fine because she just forget about that.
Right.
Every time she was confronted with it, she just get frustrated.
Would get upset. Yeah, I mean, and I struggle with that, which is, would we want to improve awareness if we could? Right? So it's not clear to me. I think that there are a lot of cases where when people are aware of their memory problem, it's distressing. So you don't necessarily want to, if the person doesn't recognize that their memory is changed and they're living a pretty happy life, I say, all right, well maybe that's the best case scenario. But there's a lot of research that shows and it depends on the family structure and how much support there is and all of these things, but if people are very adamant that they don't have a memory problem, you can also kind of get in a situation where maybe they don't want to stop driving, even though they're supposed to stop driving. They don't want to stop doing their taxes, even though maybe they should stop doing their taxes. And so it ends up then creating a more stressful situation for the patient and the patient's family, right? And safety becomes an issue. So I'm not sure, because there are times when people say, well, where are you going with this? Are you going to ultimately try to intervene to improve awareness? And say, well, I'm not really sure yet. And I think the verdict is still out, because just what you're saying, I think that ethically and morally, I don't know that increasing someone's awareness of a disease that's distressing is the right decision.
If you're too forceful with it, that's when frustration can come out. But sometimes you just have to let it be.
Yeah, and with the idea that person's quality of life and their autonomy and their safety are the most important things. So, and that's very different family to family.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That kind of touches on something that I was curious about. It's the relationship between depression and dementia.
Mm-hmm.
I read that in a significant amount of cases, depression is mistaken for dementia, and there's also a fairly high correlation between having both dementia and
Mm-hmm.
depression. And I just wanted to hear about your experiences with that, or why you think it is. In the case that Connor was talking about, could it be caused by something like knowing that you're having this memory failure and that could cause the depression itself?
Right. And it's a very good question. I taught a class at Columbia last year, and we had people do final papers, and this one student wanted to do it on dementia depression. And the person I was teaching with do this, but this is an incredibly complicated topic. The arrows go in every which way. So exactly what you said, there may be scenarios where the presence of the dementia is psychologically distressing and leading to depression. There's a lot of studies though that suggest that the emergence of depression in life is a risk factor for dementia. So it's somehow in the same physiological pathway, that the changes that start to happen that are going to ultimately lead to dementia first can lead to depression, especially if there's a vascular etiology to the dementia. And then you have what we used to talk about as pseudo-dementia, which is patients who are depressed and are mistakenly diagnosed with dementia, right? So depression, especially when it's severe, can really have cognitive symptoms that look like dementia. So there's a lot of different ways that the two can overlap and relate to one another, and it's something that we're constantly considering in our diagnosis. We measure depression all the time. And we try, for an older population, we have specific scales that try to minimize the assessment of vegetative symptoms of depression related to appetite and sleep and other aspects of physical functioning that might just change in the course of aging. So a lot of the depression instruments for older adults try to focus more specifically on the psychological components and cognitive components rather than the physical components of depression that you might see in a younger adult. But it's always something that we're thinking about.
Does lack of awareness always correlate with the appearance of neurodegenerative symptoms other than lack of awareness? So in all Alzheimer's patients, is it usually that the people who have the least amount of awareness are also the people with the most serious levels of Alzheimer's symptoms? Or
Right,
is it
no.
vary?
No, they don't seem to be related. So one of the things, I think, what a lot of people think is that it has to do with the way in which the pathology is spreading through the brain and the networks, the cognitive and metacognitive networks that it's affecting early on. So for some people, I think that the disease spreads in a way that does not affect the cognitive basis of self-awareness.
I was going to say, Dr. Cosentino and I were talking over email about your mentor, Jakob.
Yeah,
Stern, right?
yeah.
And I was reading about him in a different book, and one of the things that, this is that book I told you guys about called Now You See, about how attention sort of dictates almost everything, right? And the author of that book was describing Dr. Stern, right?
Mm-hmm.
How one of his big things is how to game plan. If you think you may be at risk for dementia or Alzheimer's, plan ahead strategies that will help you to sort of do an end run around it, or short circuit it, or at least mitigate the extent to which degeneration can happen. And so things like teaching yourself a second language, where you rewire your brain or parts of your brain so that if part of the brain is degenerating, you're creating other pathways so that maybe the degeneration isn't as pervasive or
Right.
or widespread.
Right.
And maybe that's one way that you can also account for such a variance in people with the same level of biological deterioration, and yet their clinical pictures are very different.
Right. Right. So my mentor, Jakob Stern, is really has become famous for his thoughts and his theories on what he has called cognitive reserve, which is this very interesting phenomenon. So the idea is you could have, as you were just saying, you could have two people with the same amount of changes in the brain, the same amount of Alzheimer's pathology. One person manifests those changes clinically, memory loss, disorientation, naming problems, and the other person, no signs. So this has led to decades and decades of research as to,